there's more that needs to be done that we can see from the war that's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and now what's happening in Iran that needs to be done to be able to bolster those defenses. So the details are going to matter here. The length of time that would actually be used is going to matter. So we're all kind of waiting for that supplemental request. The administration has told us would be here by the end of the month.
It sounds like you're not willing to write the administration a blank check to do this.
No, I don't think Congress should ever write any administration a blank check to be able to do it. I think we should go through the details and try to figure out what they're actually trying to accomplish and what this means.
In today's video, CNN host Kasie absolutely destroys James Lankford on CNN's The Arena. When you're talking about a $200 billion defense request, it's not unreasonable to ask simple questions about where that money is going and what the actual strategy is. History has shown that massive defense spending without clear oversight can lead to waste and unclear results, while at the same time, everyday agencies here at home are still dealing with funding issues. At the end of the day, it really comes down to transparency. If the plan is solid, it should be easy to explain. So let's dive in and watch how Kasie shuts down James Lankford on CNN's The Arena.
Senator, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start with this funding request, $200 billion. President Trump, well, he said this about it today. Watch, we'll talk about it on the other side.
Well, we're asking for a lot of reasons beyond even what we're talking about in Iran. This is a very volatile world, and the military equipment, the power of some of this weaponry is unthinkable. So we want to be sure, and it's a small price to pay to make sure that we stay tippy-top.
Do you think $200 billion is a small price?
It depends on what it is. None of us have actually seen it yet, Kasie, so I'm waiting to be able to see what the proposal is. As the president mentioned, this is more than Iran. This may be other issues. Obviously, we've got to be able to improve our drone defenses, both here in the United States and for all of our own bases around the world, and for our allies as well, to be able to partner with them on this. So there's more that needs to be done that we can see from the war that's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and now what's happening in Iran that needs to be done to be able to bolster those defenses. So the details are going to matter here. The length of time that would actually be used is going to matter. So we're all kind of waiting for that supplemental request. The administration has told us would be here by the end of the month.
It sounds like you're not willing to write the administration a blank check to do this.
No, I don't think Congress should ever write any administration a blank check to be able to do it. I think we should go through the details and try to figure out what they're actually trying to accomplish and what this means. But I'm also walking into it with an open mind, understanding that Iran has repetitively attacked the United States and United States citizens. There's some belief that's out there that Iran wasn't a threat because they don't have a missile that can hit Kansas. Well, the issue is we got 750,000 Americans that live and work in that region, in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and obviously Israel and Jordan. So many countries in that area have a lot of Americans that live there, and Iran has been perpetually attacking those Americans over and over and over again. We've had more than 200 attacks on Americans just since 2023 by Iran and its proxies. So this has gone on for a while, and now the United States is saying, you're going to stop Iran, you're going to stop attacking Americans wherever they may be, and to be able to stop them from actually advancing on nuclear weapons or trying to be able to shut off economic commerce in the Strait of Hormuz, which they've done repetitively.
I think the real question here is, where exactly is the line between necessary defense spending and just writing another massive check without clear accountability? Because $200 billion isn't small money. For context, that's more than the entire annual defense budget of most countries. And historically, when Congress rushes through large defense packages without clear oversight, it often leads to waste or unclear outcomes. The Special Inspector General reports from Iraq and Afghanistan found billions of dollars were either poorly tracked or outright wasted, even when the intentions were national security. There's also the bigger issue of strategy. The US has been dealing with Iran's regional influence for decades through sanctions, proxy conflicts, and limited military actions. But throwing more funding at the problem hasn't always translated into long-term stability. In fact, experts from places like the Council on Foreign Relations have pointed out that without a clear political or diplomatic strategy, increased military spending alone doesn't necessarily change outcomes on the ground. And then there's the domestic angle Kasie is pushing on. You've got a situation where the government is struggling to fund agencies like DHS properly, which affects things people actually feel day to day, like airport security, disaster response, and border operations. Yet at the same time, there's a push for a massive supplemental defense bill. That contrast is exactly what raises eyebrows. So the bigger point backing Kasie here is about priorities and transparency. It's not about being for or against defense spending. It's about asking, what exactly are we paying for? What's the end goal? And why does this number make sense right now? Because without clear answers to that, it starts to look less like strategy and more like a blank check. So the bigger point here is about accountability. If the request is justified, there should be a clear breakdown of where the money is going, what the timeline is, and what success actually looks like.
Sir, who do you think is driving the terms of this engagement? Is it President Trump or is it the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu?
No, it's definitely President Trump on it. Obviously, Israel has its own issues that are there. They're within missile range. So when I talk about Iran doesn't have a missile that can hit Kansas, all of Israel can be hit. As Netanyahu has said for a long time, they're a one-bomb country, that one nuclear weapon in the hands of the Iranian regime can destroy every Jew that lives in Israel. They're keenly aware of that. So they do have some priorities there, especially for regime change. Their focus is really on that. The president's focus, he's stated over and over again, you can't have a nuclear weapon, can't have a ballistic missile capability to be able to attack us, got to stop your terrorism, and you can't have a Navy that's going to take out the Strait of Hormuz over and over again. So the president has his priorities on it, Netanyahu has his.
Fair enough. When you and I spoke earlier this year about the conflict in Venezuela, and I'm sorry, it was late last year, but we had taken out, or we were thinking about taking out Nicolas Maduro there. And I want to play for you what you said about that particular country, and then we'll talk about it in this context. Take a look.
Okay. If you break it, you buy it. We've seen that when we pushed out the leadership in Libya, and it's just a collapsed, failed state.
Do you think that's true here in Iran? Did we break it and have we bought it?
Well, I pray that we have not. The focus there has been to try to provide an opportunity for the people of Iran to be able to rise up and to be able to run their own country. I serve on the Intelligence Committee. There's quite a bit of information that's coming out of what the regime is doing currently to its own people to try to suppress them, to be able to have them rise up and to be able to push back against this regime. The focus that's been there over and over again is to give them some breathing room so that they could run their own country. We don't want to try to occupy them. This is not Libya. This is not Afghanistan. This is not that situation. We're trying to be able to make sure that those folks can actually run it. That's part of the challenge on having oil and gas reserves and having the possibility for them to be able to produce their own oil and gas. At the end of this war, you don't want Iran's economy to be zero. You want their economy to still exist so that they can rise as their own people in their own country. The regime that's there has stolen those resources and used the money for terrorism and left their people in poverty. The goal is for the people to be able to actually have access to that and have a growing economy at the end.
Now, once you start talking about weakening or pressuring a regime like Iran, history shows things don't just neatly fall into place after. The US has tried versions of this before in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan, and the outcomes were rarely clean. In Libya, for example, removing leadership led to years of instability and civil conflict. In Iraq, the power vacuum after Saddam Hussein eventually contributed to the rise of ISIS. And studies have shown that regime change efforts often fail to deliver stable democracies and can actually increase instability or repression. Even in the current situation, intelligence assessments have already suggested that military action alone is unlikely to actually lead to regime change in Iran, even if leadership is targeted. And more recent reporting shows that instead of collapsing, Iran's power structure has actually tightened, with hardline groups consolidating control. That's kind of the pattern we've seen before. Pressure from the outside can sometimes strengthen the very groups it's trying to weaken. There's also the question of alignment between allies. The US and Israel might both see Iran as a threat, but their end goals aren't always identical. Analysts have pointed out that Israel has been more openly focused on long-term regime change, while the US has tried to frame its goals around deterrence and limiting nuclear capability. That difference matters because if objectives aren't fully aligned, the strategy can get messy fast. So the bigger point backing Kasie here is about consequences. It's not just can we apply pressure, it's what happens next if that pressure actually works or doesn't. Because history shows that once you break it, rebuilding or stabilizing what comes after is usually the hardest part. And it's rarely as simple as policymakers hope going in.
Sir, you, of course, on the Homeland Security Committee, and you have been such a critical voice in negotiations around immigration policy over the years. Of course, the Department of Homeland Security is currently not funded. Because Democrats want changes to some of the ways that ICE operates, the way that they do business. Do you think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, as you know, Americans are now waiting in longer and longer security lines as we head toward spring break? Just one example of the impact of this.
Yeah, there's quite a few. FEMA, Secret Service, Coast Guard, TSA. There's a lot of examples. Homeland Security has 250,000 federal employees, a very large entity that does all of our Homeland Security on it. So it's very important that we get it back open again. I've been pushing on this for weeks, saying we should stay over the weekend. We should keep working until we actually get it done. The White House, to their credit, 3 weeks ago now, actually made an offer to Democrats to say, okay, we'll add de-escalation training for all these agents. We'll do badges on all these agents. They've got to identify themselves in vehicles. They've got to have identifiable uniforms. That they've said they'll body-worn cameras to be required on this. So a lot of the aspects that Democrats have said, these are changes that we're demanding. The White House has made that offer and said, okay, let's do it. They put it in legislative language and said, let's negotiate this. The big offer they put out there actually sat on Schumer's desk for 18 days before he counter-offered. So my frustration is it feels like the politics are working for Democrats, and so they're using the DHS folks and not paying them for their political gain on it. When an offer sits there for 18 days before you respond, you know there's a problem in the negotiations at this point. Now we've actually got people talking to each other this week, trying to be able to work this out. Pleased to be able to see that. The Democrats have come back and said, okay, so now we're ready to start talking. But we got to get this resolved for all those families. It's, again, 250,000 families.
What makes Kasie's side of that exchange land is that she's focusing on the real-world impact, not just the political talking points. Because what makes Kasie's side of that exchange land is that she's focusing on the real-world impact, not just the political talking points. Because when DHS funding stalls, it's not some abstract fight in Washington, people actually feel it. You're already seeing it with TSA delays, but it goes way beyond that. During past shutdowns, TSA officers and air traffic controllers were forced to work without pay, and that led to higher absentee rates and slower airport operations nationwide. The same thing happens across agencies under DHS, from FEMA delaying disaster response coordination to Coast Guard members literally missing paychecks while still being on duty. And this isn't a small agency. DHS has over 240,000 employees, and a big chunk of them are considered essential, meaning they still have to show up even if they're not getting paid. Historically, that kind of situation hurts morale and retention. After the 2018-2019 shutdown, reports showed that federal workers started leaving public service at higher rates, especially in security-related roles. There's also the economic ripple effect. When federal employees aren't getting paid, they're not spending, which impacts local economies, especially in areas with large federal workforces. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that the last major shutdown cost the U.S. economy billions of dollars in lost productivity and delayed growth. So the bigger point backing Kasie here is that this isn't just about who's negotiating better or who's taking longer to respond. It's about the fact that basic government functions tied to national security and public safety are being caught in the middle of political gridlock. And the longer that drags out, the more it affects not just federal workers, but everyday people going through airports, waiting on disaster aid or relying on those services. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. how are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.